Does that situation in Nevada hurt a little bit?
No, I mean, Nevada, it's such a scam. They were supposed to have a primary. Trump rigged it so that the GOP chairman, who's been indicted, would go and create a caucus. We knew months ago that we weren't going to spend a day or a dollar in Nevada because it wasn't worth it. And so we didn't even count Nevada. That wasn't anything we were looking at. We knew that was rigged from the start. Our focus is on South Carolina, Michigan, Super Tuesday. So if you look what we did in Iowa and you look what we did in New Hampshire, we're continuing to grow. That's what matters, I think, more than anything else. But look at what happened this week. Here you have Republicans lost a major vote on the border. Republicans lost a major vote on Israel. Donald Trump was found that he will not have immunity in all of these court cases coming up. The RNC chair is fired. All of this chaos is happening around us, and Donald Trump's fingerprints are on every bit of it. We can't continue as the Republican Party to go forward with this chaos. You don't defeat Democrat chaos with Republican chaos, and that's why we've got to see a change. Trump had his fingerprints on all of that. We can't continue to be in this chaos. That's just a fact. And not only that, you will have a female president of the United States. It will either be me or it will be Kamala Harris. If Donald Trump is named the nominee, look at any of those general election polls. He can't win.
Yeah.
He can't. We lost so many people in the Republican Party, independent, suburban women, all of them. You look at all of that. He can't win, and I defeat Biden by double digits.
It is sort of ironic, though, Ambassador, that you are trailing President Trump by a gazillion miles, and you're quoting polls.
Got him. We fucking got him. Right where we want him.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about my boy Charles Payne, okay? Because I don't think this guy gets enough love when it comes to being one of the few guys in the legacy media that holds politicians accountable, okay? And that is what he's doing to Nikki Haley here, okay? Because the rest of the mainstream liberal media, all they want to talk about with Nikki Haley is race and stupid issues that really don't have anything to do with anything, right? But Charles Payne, on the other hand, he has taken Nikki Haley to task over what we actually really should be asking Nikki Haley about, which is foreign policy.
Always been what China has been watching for. If they see Ukraine fall,
I doubt that's the only reason.
when you'll see Taiwan move.
China has been talking about taking Taiwan from day one. This is not something that just came up over the last 2 years. They have insisted that Taiwan would be part of China for ever since the Chinese fled. Right, so this is not something that's brand new. It's just that the timeline, she wants to get this done in his lifetime. Their economy is suffering. He is desperate. He needs something like this. He needs a war to become more popular at home. If they had a war, if they invaded Taiwan 2 years into your administration, what actions would you take? And by the way, these economic actions that we've taken against Russia, I'm not sure how well they worked. Our economy was up 3.5% last year. Theirs was up 3.6%. We've got the rest of the world, the third world countries saying, hey, we don't want to be part of the SWIFT. So would you be willing to take real concrete actions?
Well, first of all, I think you have to look. China had a devastating loss when Taiwan elected a Democrat leader. I mean, that was a big win for freedom. It was a big win for democracy.
Right.
China
and by the way, it was a close election. It was a closer election than Nevada, okay?
Yo, this guy, Charles Payne, is a savage, bruh. He is a savage. But again, he was savaging Nikki Haley throughout this whole interview, okay? Because she started this interview essentially claiming that the election in Nevada was rigged.
Ambassador, there's a lot to cover on the economy and some other top issues, but of course, I've got to start with Nevada. Because listen, all the headlines showing that it was an embarrassment for you. What do you make of that? What happened there, and how does your campaign take that?
Well, I think you can look at any of the stories prior to this. I mean, we always knew Nevada was a scam. Trump had it rigged from the very beginning. There are multiple press stories on that. The GOP chair had been indicted, and they wanted us to pay $55,000 to just participate in their caucus. So we didn't spend a day or a dollar there. We weren't even worried about it. It's why we haven't talked about it. Our focus is on South Carolina, going into Michigan, going into Super Tuesday. Those are the places that we're worried about. We're not focused on Nevada.
All right, let's talk
we never were.
All right, let's talk about the issues then, okay?
Yeah, so that's when they started to talk about foreign policy, the real issues. Again, which I highly respect Charles Payne for actually pressing her on real issues. I encourage you guys to watch this whole interview. It is fascinating. I'm not going to be able to react to all of it because it's too long to react to be quite honest with you. But we'll react to some of the stuff that Charles Payne is saying, and especially towards the end where he really humiliates Nikki Haley in her delusions in regards to her keep talking about how Trump can't win, okay? And she's citing polls claiming that Trump can't win, except it seems like she's ignoring those same polls that are showing that she can't win against Trump. And Charles Payne is going to bring that up against Nikki Haley, and it's just absolutely hilarious to see Nikki Haley get savaged like this by Charles Payne, which, by the way, I want you guys to understand, for as much as the left is complaining about the right when it comes to the right being against diversity, equity, inclusion, there's nobody on the right that is questioning Charles Payne or his credentials, because he shows that despite the fact that he's black, that he's clearly knowledgeable on the issues, that he is excellent at his job, and that he's earned his position. So nobody on the right ever says that Charles Payne is a diversity hire, because clearly you can see that the guy is qualified, and the right does not question him, even despite the fact that he's black. Okay, that goes against the left's narrative that, oh, they just question any black person that is in a position of power and they just trying to break. No. I mean, when you have people like Charles Payne as a shining example of what happens when you hire black folks that are in charge, yeah, people like him should be highlighted more, because, again, I think that he's an amazing individual, and he's proof and evidence that you don't need so-called diversity and inclusion to get qualified black folks in positions of, power or, prominent positions in media, because, again, clearly his work, his knowledge, his intelligence, it speaks for itself. So without further ado, let's get into it.
So, yes, Taiwan is an issue, but what they're looking at is making sure that we can't fight back. They don't want to fight us head on. And we also, the best way to protect Taiwan is to make sure they have the equipment that they need to defend themselves. That's the biggest thing, to get our alliances together. And then you look at Russia, and to say that Russia hasn't suffered, the reason Russia hasn't suffered is because Biden has not made sure that the sanctions are on. No one should be able to get oil from Russia, and they're continuing to get it.
Sanctions.
Well, here's the problem, okay? And this is why I said yesterday in my video about the Russia-Ukraine war in regards to sanctions, and I don't even know if the sanctions are right, because there's no real evidence that these sanctions are working the way they're supposed to work. Now, what they're talking about here, the context, is that India is buying a ton of Russian oil, okay? Russia has had to lower the price of their oil because they can no longer export their oil to the European Union, which accounted for about 50% of Russian oil exports. And the European Union, I believe 1/3 of their oil imports came from Russia. And now that they cut that off, Russia, in order to fund the war in Ukraine, they have to sell oil elsewhere. Well, guess who signed up to actually buy some of that oil? China, India, Africa, and that's where Russia is exporting the oil. Now, the problem is that you can't really stop Russia from selling their oil to these other countries, because what happens is that drives up the price of oil globally. Actually, India buying a lot of this oil from Russia is keeping down the price of oil, okay? And going into a 2024 election, the last thing Biden wants to do is to actually really enforce sanctions on Russia that prevents them from exporting any oil to anybody, which again would be extremely difficult to execute and to do. But if they actually really did that, that would undoubtedly drive up the price of oil globally, which would definitely make gas prices skyrocket here in the United States. And again, that's the last thing that somebody like Joe Biden would want going into the 2024 election. But what you have here is that not only are these sanctions not working, as Russia's economy is resilient, it's still growing 3.6%, faster than the United States, actually. It's kind of backfiring, because what's happening now is that you are seeing Russia develop closer alliances with some of our enemies, like, for example, China, and they're incentivized to now develop an infrastructure that is independent of the United States, okay? You know how all these companies, allegedly pulled out of Russia when the war first started as a part of sanctions, except that just incentivized Russia really to develop infrastructure outside of the United States, outside of the West, in order for them to be self-sufficient, right? That's really all it is doing. And also on top of that, you have some countries in the EU, like, for example, Germany, that is getting around the export block that, you know, they're not supposed to be exporting goods to Russia to help them with the war in Ukraine. They're actually just exporting those goods to neighboring countries surrounding Russia, and those goods are making their way into Russia anyways. And we're talking about things like drones, semiconductors, goods, and technology that can be used for civilian and military purposes. And then you're turning around and you're seeing these things be used in the war against Ukraine, okay? And we're talking about $8.5 billion worth of sanctioned goods that essentially still made its way into Russia in 2022, despite the sanctions. So again, there are plenty of reasons why the sanctions aren't working, but I would argue that not only are the sanctions not working, they're actually backfiring, okay? They're actually, in some sense, making Russia less dependent on the West, while also strengthening their, bonds and relationships with our enemies like China, okay? So again, this is the type of conversation that we really should be having in the mainstream liberal media, right? And again, shout out to Charles Payne for actually pressing Nikki Haley on this, okay? Because you're never going to see this on CNN. You're not going to see it on MSNBC. The only thing they'll talk about with Nikki Haley is racism, right? If they're not talking about racism, they're not going to talk about anything else.
We don't want to press against India because we want them on our side, so we let them buy oil. These are real world things. On paper, things sound great, but in the real life, if India's got a chance to buy cheap oil from Russia, they're going to buy it. Of
course they're going to buy it, right? Of course they're going to buy it. Again, you can't stop India from purchasing cheap oil from Russia. And if you can't stop any of these other countries from purchasing this cheap oil from Russia, then again, what are the sanctions actually really doing? What are they really doing? Because now, again, Russia has essentially found out a way to become less dependent on the West. And Russia is still a major exporter of manufactured goods, particularly when you're talking about energy, really. I mean, they are a major exporter of energy. And essentially, you're not going to stop that, right? You're not stop. Somebody's going to buy it. If the West isn't going to buy it, somebody else is going to buy it, okay? And that's just the situation that we're in. And it seems to be helping out Russia in the long run. What we really need to be worried about when it comes to Russia is this BRICS alliance that, could be a threat to the dollar. The petrodollar, more specifically, which came about because the United States decided to decouple the dollar from gold because we had insufficient gold currencies to back our fiat money. And then we entered an agreement with the oil-producing nations to have oil sold in dollars. And in exchange, we will be basically the protector of these countries, okay? This is why we're so involved in the Middle East. It really is to protect the petrodollar, okay? But now you have Russia. In 2021, they entered an alliance with Saudi Arabia. So the United States is no longer the sole protector of Saudi Arabia. So again, you're seeing these threats of, the petrodollar being under attack here, okay? If you're talking about this gold-backed currency and trying to get the world back on the gold standard, yeah, I think that's honestly probably the biggest threat that Russia poses to the United States in the West is dethroning the dollar. And again, what we really should be paying attention to is this BRICS alliance that seems to be getting economically stronger and stronger and stronger. That's what we actually really should be paying attention to when it comes to Russia.
I ask you because you put out a tweet earlier today.
Listen, I've dealt with India too, Charles. I got to say, I've dealt with India too. I've talked with Modi. India wants to be a partner with us. They don't want to be a partner with Russia. The problem is India doesn't trust us to win. They don't trust us to lead. They see right now that we're weak. India has always played it smart.
Right.
They've played it smart and they've stayed close with Russia because that's where they get a lot of their military equipment. When we start to lead again, when we start to get the weakness out and stop putting our head in the sand, that's when our friends India, Australia, New Zealand, all of them will, and Israel, Japan, South Korea, all of them want to do that. Japan gave themselves $1 billion stimulus to become less dependent on China. India gave themselves $1 billion stimulus to become less dependent on China.
It's going to take a lot
more
than that,
We need to start building up our alliances.
I don't disagree with that.
But you have to first acknowledge you have a problem.
But the problem is, to your point, India is smart and they're playing both sides. Just moments ago, before the show, you put out a tweet. Republicans keep doing the same thing and getting the same results. Chaos. That's the definition of insanity this week. RNC imploded. GMP House can't pass anything. Trump lost another court case, threw another temper tantrum. Vote for Trump is vote for more chaos. So What audience is this for, this tweet? What audience is this for?
It's for the liberals. That's who it's for, right? Charles Payne, again, he's calling out the obvious here, which is the fact that Nikki Haley remaining in this race is not actually really helping Republicans. It's not helping conservatives, okay? Her remaining in the race is actually helping Democrats, as she's basically now attacking the GOP. She's attacking Trump, and it seems like she's kind of doing it on behalf of the left. That's kind of what it seems like here, okay? So Charles Payne is asking a good question. Who is this for, right? Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Because you're not talking to the GOP when you put out a tweet like this. It seems like to me you're talking to the left, right? You're letting the left know that, hey, these people are not people that you should be voting for, right? Again, it's fascinating. Again, shout out to Charles Payne for being the only guy with the cojones to actually confront Nikki Haley with real questions and look at her face. She can't stand it, right? She can't stand it. In fact, I'm going to screenshot this, okay? Because this is the perfect thumbnail.
It's for America. I mean, you look at the fact that here we have a country in disarray and a world on fire. I voted for Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. This is not personal for me. But you look at the chaos that has been caused. We lost a border deal yesterday. We lost an Israel aid deal yesterday.
Did you like the border deal?
The RNC... The border deal didn't go far enough, but Congress doesn't need to go home and leave it. And Trump didn't need to say don't do anything. They need to get in a room and get this right. It needs to include remain in Mexico. It doesn't need to have a 5,000 person threshold. And we do need to make sure asylum is tougher. So
yeah, so here's what I think about that. I do think that Nikki Haley has a point here when it comes to how the Republican Party is handling this border issue, right? My personal opinion is that instead of saying that we don't need legislation and basically demanding that Biden do executive orders in order to fix the border issue, which is just a Band-Aid, that's not a real fix. That is temporary. That's something that the next president can come in and they can either keep doing or they can, get rid of it, which is why we're dealing with this situation right now. Yeah, we do actually need a permanent fix, but that permanent fix is not being promoted and marketed enough by the Republican Party, okay? You have the Secure the Border Act. That is legislation that you've already passed in the House. Why even come to the table to negotiate a compromise with Democrats when you don't have to? When 70% of the country is saying that Joe Biden is responsible for what's happening at the border and they're blaming Biden's policies, then why do you even need to come to the table to even negotiate? You say, no, this is our bill. This closes the border. We don't need to trust Democrats to close the border because they've only made it worse since Trump left office. It's our bill or no bill. This bill actually closes the border and we're not going to do anything else except this, right? And that is what you say. You basically force Joe Biden to either get on board with the Republican solution or he can walk. And if he walks, then he'll continue to take the blame for what's happening. But if you always stick to your guns of this is the real solution, this is the fix, instead of saying, well, we don't need legislation at all, which is what some of these Republicans are saying in a very, again, it's just not smart way politically, because it just makes it seem like they don't really want to solve the problem when you say that. If you just stick to your guns and say, no, we have legislation, we want to fix it, here it is, and you scream at your top of your lungs, you say, this is it. You go on every single interview, you say, Secure the Border Act. You want to fix the border? Secure the Border Act. You want to fix the border? Secure the Border Act. We have it right here. Why should we negotiate with them? That is what they actually really should be doing, right? So I do agree with Nikki Haley to a certain extent, even though Trump did say that we shouldn't accept anything less than, a perfect bill, which again would be the Secure the Border Act, right? The Republican legislation. So I don't think Trump is necessarily saying don't do anything at all. What he's saying is that unless you're going to get everything, then you shouldn't do anything, right? Because ultimately you're going to get Biden a win without the border actually being secure.
So why is Congress allowed to leave? It's not a one and done. And for Trump to say don't take on the border until the election, America's acting...
Again, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. Trump has said multiple times that this bill is not good enough. And that's the reason why he's opposed to it. But again, this is the spin that they're putting on it. And part of the reason why she's putting this spin on it is because, again, Republicans in Congress have done a terrible job of just sticking to their guns with the Secure the Border Act and just saying that this is what we want to do. Anything less than that is unacceptable. Instead of just doing that, them coming out here and saying we don't need legislation at all has opened up the door for this talking point to make it look like Trump is essentially trying to use the border to sabotage Joe Biden instead of putting the country first, when that's not necessarily the case.
acting like it's September 10th. We better remember what September 12th felt like. It only takes one to have a 9/11 moment. We've got to get our border secure. No more excuses on that. But you look, Trump lost his court case on getting immunity.
Right.
All of this chaos. The RNC chair lost her job. Trump had his fingerprints on all of that. We can't continue to be in this chaos. That's just a fact. And not only that, you will have a female president of the United States. It will either be me or it will be Kamala Harris. If Donald Trump is named the nominee, look at any of those general election polls. He can't win.
Yeah.
He can't. We lost so many people in the Republican Party, independents, suburban women, all of them. You look at all of that. He can't win, and I defeat Biden by double digits.
It is sort of ironic, though, Ambassador, that you are trailing President Trump by a gazillion miles, and you're quoting polls. But I hear where you're coming from. I love this conversation. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I hope you come back.
Wow. Wow. Look at Nikki Haley's face, bruh. Charles Payne has an amazing point, okay? His point is that you're quoting polls, talking about how Trump can't win, which is not even true, right? If you look at the actual polls, Trump is winning across the board. Even in the averages, he's winning. When you look at the swing states, he's winning. But yet Nikki Haley's out here talking about how he can't win, but yet she's ignoring polls in the GOP showing that she can't win, right? Again, it's amazing how that works. It really is. Again, I love this interview from Charles Payne. This is exactly how the liberal media should be conducting interviews with people like Nikki Haley and Democrats, but they never do. They want to sit around and talk about racism all day. Funny how the black man did not talk to Nikki Haley about racism at all. The black man actually talked to her about the real issues, right? But the white liberals want to sit around and talk to Nikki Haley about racism all day. Again, it's amazing.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Really appreciate it.
Go to NikkiHaley.com and join our movement to make America normal again.
He know he embarrassed her, bruh. He know he embarrassed her. Wow. Incredible stuff. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative.